Costanza, Matteo, should we start?
I'm ready, Costanza. I don't know if we have Peter with us already. Costanza is trying to contact Peter, who is in a very different time zone. And yeah, we were waiting for him to connect as he is the main person today. So let's...
Exactly. I was going through the name list and I was like, I need your name here.
Because you can do very well without me today, but without Peter, that would make a little sense. So let's wait a second, Costanza.
Yes, I've just spoken with Peter, no problem. He told me that I spoke with him on Teams. He told me that he has just a little problem with Zoom, but he's gonna fix it. So please let's start, and he will join us in 5 minutes, I think.
Okay, well, give me a sign and I'll say a few words in the opening anytime.
If I may, Matteo, when you will announce, I will start the recording as well.
So, shall we start? Yes? Okay. Then good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. I am Matteo Rosati, the officer in charge of the culture unit at the UNESCO Regional Bureau for Science and Culture in Europe. And together with my colleague Costanza Piderbo, I am also the responsible officer for UNESCO as a partner in Smart Culture. Now, let me first thank our partner ULAP for having co-organized this webinar. And of course, I thank all of the attendees for your time and attention. I also inform everybody that the webinar is being recorded and streamed live on the Smart Culture Facebook page, and it will be then later uploaded on the website as well. Why UNESCO is part of this? Well, UNESCO decided to join the Smart Culture Consortium for two reasons. On the one hand, we believe that the project may benefit UNESCO in our quest to develop an approach to sustainable culture-based tourism, which is in line with our mandate and program. But on the other, we were convinced that the expertise of UNESCO on this subject could reinforce the project by facilitating its alignment to the relevant international standards that have been developed within UNESCO's scope of action. And along this line, we are offering the leading labs in the project the opportunity to participate in pilot capacity building activities on selected topics, of which this webinar is part, together with a workshop that we are going to hold in Utsjoki in 2 weeks, and to which we are very much looking forward. Now, one person that was key to developing UNESCO's expertise on culture and tourism is our colleague Peter Debrine, whom we mentioned already and are waiting for joining us. And Peter developed and coordinated for a long time the World Heritage and Sustainable Tourism Program. So Peter is our main resource for this webinar, and I take this opportunity to sincerely thank him for the availability. Now, tourism is an industry, and like any other industry, it generates direct benefits and costs, as well as positive and negative externalities to our economies, to our societies, to our environment. The key to achieving a truly sustainable tourism then relies, to a great extent, I believe, in asking the right questions to the right people. Now, what do we want to obtain by developing tourism? And on the other hand, what do we want to avoid when developing tourism? What are we willing to share and what not? In other words, how much change are we ready for? Now, to be credible, these questions must be asked to the widest possible range of stakeholders as part of an inclusive process where tourism and cultural policies are in close dialogue, so that the two sectors can possibly agree on objectives, strategies, and even on limits with regard to the form and to the extent of tourism development. This, I believe, is the starting point from which Peter later on will guide and provoke us during the rest of our time together today and again in Utsjoki in a couple of weeks from now. So this is all from my side for the time being. I'll stay with you for the rest of the webinar, and Costanza, of course, for any question related to also organizational issues for the upcoming workshop. And I'm happy now to hand the floor over to Mira from ULAP for a brief introduction to the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Matteo, and thank you, Costanza, and thank you, UNESCO, for this great opportunity to be here and to learn about the capacity building program. And hello to all participants, and thank you for your participation and warm welcome on my behalf to this first workshop session. My name is Mira Alhonsua, and I work at the University of Lapland and in the Smart Culture project as one of the Living Lab manager. With me here is my co-worker, colleague Ella Björn. So in this project, our Living Lab is located in Utsjoki, where the capacity buildings are also focusing on. A few practical things about this 2-hour workshop. If you need any help with translations, you can ask me and Ella for help. We will do our best to translate and help with that point of view. Also, at this point, I would like to say that the next UNESCO capacity building workshop, which Matteo also mentioned, which will be in Thursday, 12th of May, that's a full day or all day workshop held in Utsjoki, and we are trying to get more participants there. And that is why we are keeping the registration link open. So we warmly welcome more participants to make this next workshop possible. And if you have any questions regarding the workshop, so don't hesitate to contact me. I'm happy to help and answer any questions. So I think we could then move on to the next step and introduce ourselves to each other. If I give the floor first to Ella, and then I will go through this list of names in order. And also I remind you that this event is live streamed and recorded, as Matteo said, meaning if you don't want to tell your full name, well, we can see those names, but if you don't want to show your picture, you don't have to do that. So feel free to say whatever you want from your background. So Ella, please.
Okay, so my name is Ella Björn, and I work in the University of Lapland. And I have been working for the Smart Culture project for more than 1 year now. And I work as a project planner in the project, and I have worked closely with the Utsjoki Living Lab. And my background is in tourism research. Thank you.
And then Costanza.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Sorry for my camera switched off. So my name is Costanza Fidalgo. I'm Assistant Project Officer at the UNESCO Regional Bureau for Science and Culture in Europe. So basically I work very closely with Matteo. Right now I'm following Smart Culture on behalf of UNESCO. So I'm under this project. It's a wonderful project about sustainable cultural tourism in Europe. And generally speaking, I take care of different issues, cultural related issues within UNESCO's mission. hope to all of you, I really hope that you will enjoy today's workshop.
Thank you, Constanza. Next will be Bernat.
Hello everyone. I'm Bernat. I'm working as an intern at UNESCO, so I'm helping basically the culture unit, and my background comes from journalism and intercultural studies.
Thank you, Bernat. And Clara, please.
Hello everyone. This is, sorry, I'm trying to open the camera. This is Clara. I'm head of communication and marketing at CM Zaragoza, one of the partners to Smart Culture project. So we give support to everything that has to do with communication in the project, in this wonderful project, as Constanza said. Thank you.
Thank you, Clara. And Diego, please.
I think he's out of the office in a different.
Okay. No
department.
worries. So we move on. Ivana.
Hello, everyone. Yes,
Hello.
I'm here. Thank you. I am intern at the UNESCO Regional Bureau for Science and Culture in Europe here in Venice. I'm here to learn more about the UNESCO office activities. This is my first day of internship, and my background is in cultural heritage preservation and protection.
Thank you, Ivana. And then we have Jonna Wood.
Hello, everyone. I just got the invitation for this workshop today. I work in marketing and business and sustainability development at a business called Aurora Holidays in Utsjoki. I just started there about 6 months ago, so I'm just here listening intently and trying to learn everything and network with all of you guys. So very excited to hear what this is all about.
So cool to get you here. Thank you, Jonna.
Thanks.
And then we have Kirsi Suomi, please.
Yes, hello. My name is Kirsi Suomi and I work in Responsible Sàmi Tourism Project at the Sàmi Parliament in Finland. And I also represent Sàmi Parliament in Smart Culture. We've had this project for 5 years, and capacity building is extremely important issue, and also the consideration of the host communities that receive the tourists, whether they want or not. It's a pity the workshops you're going to have in Utsjoki are only in person, as I cannot attend them in person. I would have wanted to, but as they're not hybrid, unfortunately, it's only this one, and I think the last one I can attend, which is a pity, but thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirsi. I hope that your worries have been heard. So maybe there is some kind of solutions for those, because you are not the only one with those wishes. Laura, you are next. Laura, please.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you. I work at the UNESCO Regional Bureau for Science and Culture in Europe. My background is in cultural heritage and art history, and I'm really happy to be here today and eager to know more about the Living Lab. So thank you.
Thank you, Laura. And we have then Lisa.
Good. Yeah, that's me probably. Yes, good afternoon, everyone. My name is indeed Lisa, and I present Visit Finland. I also received the invitation a few days ago, and I was very thankful for that because I work as a head of sustainable development and Visit Finland, and through this I've been collaborating closely with Utsjoki region as well. With focus on sustainability, but especially the cultural dimensions. And I have also been involved in some of the UNESCO projects, so really interested in this project as well.
Thank you, Lisa. Nice to have you here. And next will be Mariana, please.
Hello, everyone. I'm Mariana Aikio, and I'm the chairwoman of the Sàmi Turchi Association. It's the Sàmi Handicraft Association in Inari. And I heard yesterday about this session, and I thought that I listen and follow what's going on. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mariana. Also really nice to have you here. And then we have Mika.
Yes. Hi all. Hi all. Hello. Hear my voice?
Maybe a little bit problems with connection. Let's try again.
All right. Can you hear me now?
Yes, now it's better. Great.
All right. Well, good. Great. So I'm Mika. Nice to meet you all. I work for the Municipality of Inari. I work in a project called Sustainable Tourism and Digital Communications in Northern Lapland. And we work close together with Utsjoki area as well. And I'm also very interested in the culture aspects of sustainable tourism. So I'm here to listen and learn as well. It's a pleasure to meet you all.
Thank you, Mika. Very nice to have you here also. And then Minna, please.
Hello, everyone. My name is Minna Nousiainen, and I currently work as a university teacher of tourism research here at the University of Lapland. And when I saw this announcement, I was so intrigued by the topic, so I thought that I will pop in for a while that I can and hope to learn a lot of new things also. So very pleased to be here.
Thank you, Minna. Super. I think now we have went through all in my list here. Well, there is one person that I haven't introduced, but I will give the whole floor to Peter. So please, Peter, welcome and nice to have you here.
Thank you, Mira, and hello, everybody. Can everybody hear me fine? Is connection
very good?
Okay? Great. Yeah, sorry to be late on today's workshop. Well, it's very nice to meet everybody, and I think that from all of the introductions, we have a very diverse group, which is great, and we're very eager to really advance, I think, the Living Lab, the Smart Culture Living Lab project in Utsjoki. So again, very pleased to be here, and I guess just as a short introduction of me, for the past 10 years, I managed the World Heritage and Sustainable Tourism program at UNESCO. And currently I'm a destination expert and a UNESCO consultant helping the project. So again, I'm very happy to be here. And I also look forward to the in-person workshop that we'll have in a couple of weeks. So the idea is this is going to, we're going to be covering certain subject matters here, destination management, and then that would be followed on by the in-person workshop where we'll be doing more interactive activities with the group. So you have to imagine that this is a continuation. It's just not one workshop. So with the way that I've structured it. So that's, as we say, enough about me. I guess we should just dive right into the workshop. Does that make sense, Mira?
Yes, that makes sense. I think we are in the schedule. That's the next thing that you will present the day and.
Okay. So yeah, so I wanted to give you a little bit of background information on UNESCO and our approach to sustainable tourism, because I don't. Sometimes it's obvious and sometimes it's not as obvious, because tourism pops up, if you would, in different parts of UNESCO, and in particular the culture sector. So for those of you who don't understand the way UNESCO is structured, all of us are within the culture sector of UNESCO, and that is where a lot of the, I mean, most of the work that we've done that connects to tourism. There is in the science sector, we also have man and biosphere reserves, which deal with tourism, and geoparks, we deal with tourism. And then there's also the creative cities of UNESCO, which also touch on tourism. So I'll talk a little, you'll be hearing me talk about these other designations that UNESCO does, because they're similar and that kind of stems from that. As I mentioned, my main experience and my main thrust for the past few years has been World Heritage. But the approach that we take, which we call a destination approach, so it's not, and for some of you, it's going to be perhaps very familiar, but it all stems from that. We really want to approach tourism holistically. So, and the one of the main pillars of what we do is putting the community first. So we're really looking at, in the case of the World Heritage Site, or it could be a protected area, or it could be some sort of a nature park at the center of it, but really looking at the whole destination as a whole, you know, from the point of when a visitor will enter into, come to the destination, there's usually some sort of a transportation center, et cetera. And then how they move and go through that destination is what we're going to talk about. Because ultimately what most destinations want is they want the visitor to stay longer in that destination. And that's very important, because when you stay longer, you spend money in that destination, and that money then gets recycled into the local community. So a lot of what we're going to be talking about basically is how we can get people to inspire people to visit the destination and stay longer in that destination. And then how do you do that? And how, what are the roles of the different stakeholders to do that? So I want to just share a quick presentation on this idea of destination management, because I think it is fundamental to what we're doing. And then I'll unpack it a bit in the second part and focus in on I think the priorities that you have identified, which center around more or less marketing, communication, interpretation, these things. Because I think that's obviously a core part of our approach to destination management. And I think it'll probably help sort of provide that foundation of how we're going to move forward. And then, as I mentioned in the second workshop, when we come all together. So if you bear with me for 1 second while I share my screen. So can everybody see my screen?
So far,
Not
no.
yet. Not yet, Peter.
Okay. Now we're getting.
Yes.
Now we can see it.
Okay. Excellent. So in terms of how, you know, how do you approach this? You know, oftentimes when we go to destination, I think we really want to have those stakeholders, those people that live in that destination, to come together to really think about what they want. I mean, what kind of tourism do you want? How can you shape tourism? And I think that's oftentimes people feel that tourism is something that just happens. They don't really control. It depends on where you are in that value chain of the delivery of tourism. And so I think in terms of really a fundamental ideas, that the understanding that you can shape tourism that affects you in the future and make it what you want and you need it to be. So really, it sounds very simple, and you may say, well, of course that's the truth. But this fundamental, having this vision of what kind of tourism, what type of tourism, what sort of visitor you want, is, I think, very critical, because everything then stems from that. I think for the Utsjoki region, it has its own unique, certainly its unique selling points, its unique features that would be inspiring for somebody to come visit. But it's probably not as well known from what I understand, and it is remote. So, but that also adds to its special qualities. So you want, because the fact that it is remote, it is very much people that live there live very much in harmony with nature. So all of these aspects really enhance, if when you're communicating or marketing the destination, enhance that. So again, this idea of having that vision of what you want, I think, is fundamental. It's a very good starting place to do that. And we'll do, as I mentioned, some of these exercises next week to get more of that information from you. I think, Mira, did everybody receive the questionnaire?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. So once you have that, once you understand about what you can do with tourism, we always say I always sort of jokingly say that it's a simple recipe. Obviously, tourism is very complicated and can be very complicated in terms of how it's managed, and because it is a very complex system, there are a lot of stakeholders in terms of how visitors come in and out of destination, and who is responsible for working very closely with the visitors to ensure that the visitor experience is what you want it to be and represents what you feel are the values that exist in Utsjoki. So again, this idea of bringing together the value of the different stakeholders and what you want is again very, very, very important. But it really starts with this honest assessment of the product. One of the things that a lot of destinations that are eager to have more tourism often fail to really understand and do that honest assessment of what is the tourism product, what do we have, what's being offered now, how do tourists come into the destination, into the region. I'll also be interchanging the destination region thing, and you'll understand why I do that, because a destination is as large or as small as you want to define it. It could be just an attraction. You can say, okay, that church is in itself a destination, or that national park is a destination. But to really capture all of the tourism potential within that, you have to take that broader look. And so I'll sort of illustrate that in my next slide. But obviously for UNESCO, as I mentioned, we a lot of the work in the culture sector centers around tourism, around World Heritage Sites. And that, I think, is probably obvious to everybody. World Heritage Sites are some of the most iconic tourist destinations in the world. And they also are sort of those magnets of people, see a World Heritage Site. And I think nowadays they sort of think, oh, okay, UNESCO says this is interesting, it'd probably be interesting. So there is an undeniable link between World Heritage and tourism, and UNESCO understands that and is trying to work with that. It was interesting, before the pandemic, we were talking about tourism in a very different light. I think in a lot of destinations, tourism was actually a bit of a problem. There were too many tourists in some of these sites. Certainly some of the World Heritage Sites were experiencing very high numbers, which were putting a strain on the system. It's a very different world today, right now, with the pandemic. People are starting to travel again, which is great. And I think this is a real time to do exactly what we're doing through this process, and really looking at tourism and how we can harness that tourism to, when it does come back, that we make it what we want it to be. So again, I'm emphasizing the fact that everybody coming together needs to come up with that vision. I think the other idea is that with tourism, there's always the question of, do we have enough infrastructure? Do we have, on a larger scale, are there enough places to eat? Are there enough places to stay? Are there enough other things that you would want in a destination? And infrastructure always comes into that, you know, the idea of buildings for tourism. This obviously is essential, I think, in terms of a World Heritage Site is very in particular, because World Heritage Sites in that sense are a bit frozen in time. We really want to protect what we call that outstanding universal value, and oftentimes things have a negative impact on that outstanding universal value. And a lot of times infrastructure and buildings could potentially have that. So when you are considering like a master plan for tourism, and you realize that you need to do that in a way that's really respectful of the local environment, that again, if there are heritage values that you're talking about in the destination, which I'm sure it is, because heritage values again could cover the whole map, from a spiritual heritage value to an actual physical building in the destination that a visitor may want to visit. So I think the proper investment in that is very important. UNESCO has for many years now, and Matteo, maybe in a question and answer in the discussion, we can talk a little bit more about the role of a visitor center and how important they are in the destination. And again, helping the visitor better understand what they're visiting and what they're seeing, and again, trying to better connect with those local values in the destination. And of course, we do all of this through what we call storytelling. This is, you know, as I mentioned, you know, we have World Heritage. We also have Living Heritage. It's another convention of UNESCO. And again, these conventions of UNESCO create lists, and that's just you know, it's an aspect of how those two conventions are structured. But by creating those lists, again, you kind of create a system where it could be interesting to Living Heritage as well as World Heritage. And but I think it's fundamentally important for everybody to understand that UNESCO again is doing this because we want to protect these heritage values. We want to safeguard living heritage, and we want to, you know, to enhance those values in terms of tourism. So it's very important how tourism is developed ultimately. And a way to really do that is to really invest in what we call storytelling. So the idea of destination or a region telling a story and drawing out those stories is going to determine whether or not you have a really interactive, deep visitor experience or not. So again, the storytelling happens at very many places. There's opportunities to do it in an airplane, once you get in an airport and you're in a taxi, and I'll talk a little bit about that in the next slide. But it's also a way to empower the businesses. So you, again, it's excuse me, to emphasize different people's roles in this is, I think, going to be very critical. Excuse me, I have a bit of a cold, so I may be losing my voice a little bit. And then again, it's tourism planning, tourism management. I know many of you know this, but it's not static. It's a very dynamic system. And so you can't just come and say, okay, we're going to do a strategy. We're going to think about this now, and then never revisit it. Of course, you have to do it again and again and again because it changes. And I think the last couple of years of all of our lives have demonstrated how quickly things can change. So when we were, so I think, again, as I said, we kind of want to move to a sort of bigger view of things in terms of tourism, and I'm very happy for the in-person workshop, because I'm going to be coming into the destination as you would as an international visitor. So it will be very interesting to me when I come to Utsjoki, because again, it takes some time to get there. So you fly to Helsinki, you fly to another destination, and then you have to take a car. So how do you deal with that? What does that look like? How do you manage that destination? How do you define that destination? So it's in this sense, and it's a pity that we can't really interactively do this, because it's always fun to do that. But how would you, everybody in the room today, how would you define the destination that we're talking about? And to kick this off, I'd like to just give a little bit of a graphic view of this. So this, I'm using World Heritage as an example, but again, it could be you're going to have some sort of attraction in your region, in your destination that is a must-see that probably gets a lot of visitors already. So you can sort of look at that in that same context. So here's the site. It's a protected area. It could be a park. It could be something that people will be attracted to or inspired to visit when they come to Utsjoki. But the first thing is when you arrive, most people, you have to arrive at the transportation center. So in this case, you fly into an airport, then you take local transportation, you have to, or an airport or a train, for instance. And so these transportation hubs are really important. And they're also an opportunity to start telling the story of a destination. So you imagine if as I mentioned, I'm coming internationally, you probably have to fly through Helsinki. So Helsinki is the first point. You could imagine in the Helsinki airport, there could be some little marketing campaign, some displays about, when you're in Finland, come to Utsjoki. We've all seen it a million times when we get off planes. There's opportunities to tell us about what's special about what we're going to be seeing in that destination. So again, airports and train stations are critical for that. And then oftentimes you'll take a taxi because it's, or you'll rent a car or, another form of transportation. And I always say that taxis are some of the best concierges or stewards of a destination, and the fact that they know where everything is. They know how to get there. They know what's interesting. So taxis, again, it's sort of I always think it's a fundamental thing. I always start chatting up a taxi just to see what they have to say about the destination. And then once you're in that destination, oftentimes you'll meet a tour guide. UNESCO often understands this and understands that tour guides and tour operators, for that matter, are fundamental in this in terms of delivering that interpretation, in terms of telling those stories. And we want to make sure that those stories are told correctly or are right. I don't know. I think all of us have been in some destinations on holiday, and I've heard a tour guide say something. It's like, I know that's not right. Why are they saying that? So that, sort of the making things up kind of thing. So UNESCO, we spend a lot of time helping to train tour guides, especially about UNESCO's values and why UNESCO is promoting a certain type of tourism. So tour guides are essential in that. The other fundamental thing, obviously, is hotel and accommodation. Once you come into the destination, you need some place to stay. And this is something that you, again, want to encourage people to come when they come to Utsjoki. They're going to likely have to stay at least one night just because it's a far way to travel. So automatically, you'll probably, it'll be interesting to see the numbers and maybe we can get those for our in-face workshop to better understand the numbers of people that are coming to the destination and what times of year they're coming, what is the inspiration for that travel in those certain times of the year. So in order to make it more worthwhile for that visitor when they're coming into the destination. So hotels, hostels, family shares, all of these pieces of the puzzle that are within the hospitality or accommodation sector are very important. And again, that's an opportunity for that business to understand that destination, to give information about that destination, and to tell stories about that destination. This is, I think, and it's also an opportunity for those businesses to reflect the values of the destination in the product that they offer. And I think this is also something that's very critical. You want everybody, when they come to a destination or a region, they want an authentic experience. They want to see and experience the local culture. So that's the best way to do that, is to reflect that in some of these businesses that are catering to the visitors. So hotels and accommodation, I think, are one of the critical things. They're also linked to the next piece, which is you have to eat. So again, restaurants, how we get food, how that is done is really going to be. The other thing is you often have a town or a village that's nearby again. So looking at it in a broader sense. So you have one attraction, the must-see that people are going to come, but you will have an adjacent town that also has something that would be maybe interesting. So again, this idea of looking at it not just as one thing that within a destination, but a larger thing. Again, you'll get that benefit of perhaps getting them to stay longer because there may be one of the best restaurants in the region in the nearest town. So again, there's ways to really entice people to move within the larger destination. And then it goes. So you have the other things. You have, as I mentioned, you have food and drink, and you have shops and retail. I think the shops and retail is another important thing, because most people, when they go on holiday and when they come to visit a destination, you want to buy something. I think all of us are like that, or you have to buy that gift for your husband or your wife or your kids, or if you're on business travel. But again, this idea of the retail, and depending on the destination, sometimes shopping is a reason for people to go to a destination. I don't think that's the case for Utsjoki. You're not going to go up to Lapland just to buy clothes, but you understand my point that this is very important, and it's also a way to include the local community, because it's or the local community, but also the local handicrafts perhaps that are made there that are unique to that destination. So again, you really want to emphasize the uniqueness, the different things that you can do there that perhaps you can't do any other place. That is, I think, should be sort of something that everybody's thinking about, how they can make the creative economy there come out and be reflected in the tourist products that are developed. And so all of these things, as I said, from the hotels, all of these are part of that tourism value chain, and there are opportunities where they can be enhanced by the local culture. They can be enhanced by the locals participating in that. It could be something that is a local festival that takes place. It could be music, it could be food. Again, so all of these things really shape the visitor experience and enrich the visitor experience, and understanding that, presenting that is what is really fundamentally what we're talking about. So again, you have all of a sudden from one small attraction, you're now looking at a much larger area, which is what we call a destination. So I think I thought this would be a good way to illustrate how all of this comes together and what we're talking about, because I think Utsjoki is unique in that, because we are talking about the region. There's obviously a town called Utsjoki, and it perhaps is a destination that tourists move through onto another destination that's further north or further afield. So again, this is something else to consider if you have a situation where people are moving through your destination or your region to go to another one, which is a more popular destination, but it's not in your region. That's something that you need to understand and factor into how and what kind of products you're going to be offering the visitor that's coming to the destination. How are we on time, everybody? Unfortunately, I don't have a time clock, but I think we're okay, right?
I think, Peter, we are okay. Yeah.
Okay, great. Any questions so far? I know I've been talking a lot, but I think there's with Zoom calls, you're inevitably somebody's going to be having to talk, because it's hard to have interaction. So if there's any questions or you need any clarifications, just let me know and I can pause it. So please don't. I want this to be informal. The thing about in-person workshops is you can set the mood with body language and all this thing. With Zoom calls, it's much harder. And I know it's often hard just to listen to one person talk in a screen. So again, please interrupt me. Tell me, wait, I don't understand that. So why should we do this? There are certain benefits about working in a destination. And I think one of the first things is to once you start, again, you really understand tourism at that destination. What is it? What's happening? Where are people coming from? How long are they staying, as I mentioned before? But it really is a good way to secure those benefits for the community. Because again, if you're looking at something more holistically in a larger scale, again, ultimately, hopefully what you're going to be doing is developing an itinerary for a visitor that takes them to see wonderful things, experience wonderful things in a larger area, so different communities can benefit that. So if you're just going to one place, then sort of everything has to come there. But if you sort of spread it out in terms of saying, okay, in 10 kilometers, there's something else to see. In 20 kilometers, there's something else to see. It's that kind of a thing. And you can even define that even larger in terms of itineraries. And this is something that I'll talk about in the next segment of the workshop, where we're really looking at how to do that. And there's a lot of there's been a lot of I think attention. There's been a lot of people wanting to create what we call cultural routes. There's the Institute of Cultural Routes at the Council of Europe, for instance, and they designate cultural routes. And those are usually based on a historic narrative. So the most famous one is the Santiago de Compostela in Spain and France. And it's one of these things where you actually create an itinerary or a route that connects like heritage or connects some sort of a storyline in terms of the different aspects of that itinerary. So you can do that in a small scale, you can do that on a large scale. Again, I think this is something that probably would benefit from the region to be looking at things and how you connect things and making those itineraries. Because obviously that's how you add that value to the product and the experiences I was talking about. That's how you then determine what tourism infrastructure you're going to need. And it, when you're working at that larger scale, you also gives you more opportunities to communicate with the visitor, manage visitor movements. This again is something that is I think very important, because if you have everybody, the tourism industry, the tour operators, the destination management organizations telling you to go to certain places, that's going to be probably where visitors go. So how you communicate is critical to how you manage. So this is again fundamental, that these two things are inextricably linked, as we say. Before the pandemic, as I said, with a lot of World Heritage sites, there was a problem with too many visitors. I think Costanza and Matteo, you live in probably one of the most densely packed tourism destinations in the world, and the challenges that brings to how the quality of life for people who live there but aren't in the tourism value chains, because this is also a fundamental thing, is that how you maximize those benefits for everybody in that community, not just those that are associated with tourism, to really again get that added benefit, and more importantly, how visitors move within that destination. We're working, for instance, with another site. It's a big protected area in Vietnam called Ha Long Bay, where they're really trying to manage the visitors to a very fine level in that sense. And because they get a lot of visitors, and how you access that site is on a boat. And so you have an opportunity to control the numbers of people going on the site, because you can control the number of people that are going onto boats and the timing of that. And what we're doing in that site is trying to identify what we call a carrying capacity, or a number of optimal visitors that can be. So you're not in a queue, you're not waiting to see that must-see destination with 10, 15 other boats. And again, so how you manage those visitors is very important. I don't think that's necessarily the case in the Utsjoki region, but there may be those those attractions, and this is something you can share with us, is, you know, could be potential problems where there's too many tourists at certain times of day. So how you manage them is critical, and how you reach them is through communication. So I just wanted to emphasize those 2 points. We also have in many times seen trying how we can get more from a visitor in terms of helping us protect the sites. That's why I put that in there, fundraising for visitors. It's probably, it may not be something that's applicable for Utsjoki, but again, this is also an opportunity to get some other benefits from people visiting, because in terms of protection, and again, for UNESCO, this is very fundamental. We always need help in protecting the World Heritage Sites, and the visitors that are coming to those sites. Yes, they're spending many money on tourism, but oftentimes they want to give more. So this is the idea of fundraising for visitors. And then finally, it's really monitoring the risks and the challenges. This is something that I think gets back to the fact that, you know, none of this is static. It's a very dynamic system, and the fact that you're having to do things again and again, but also to adjust based on those risks and those challenges that emerge. So really looking at this and monitoring this is going to be very important, and putting in place those mechanisms that will help you do that. I think one of the things that we've really felt over the past couple of years is how fragile tourism is in terms of a major disruptive event like the pandemic. And UNESCO has been spending a lot of time and seeing how we could help those communities become more resilient to that. And again, the way you do that is fundamentally by how you manage those risks and challenges, and put in place measures that will help build that resiliency for the next big disruptive event, because unfortunately there probably will be another one. And I think the big one that comes to mind, to everybody's mind, is climate change. So again, how that's going to be affecting Utsjoki, how that's going to be affecting that destination may be something that you need to consider in terms of how things are changing, how seasons are changing. You may get a couple more weeks in your tourism destination because the weather's changing. So again, understanding and monitoring those risks and challenges is critical. Let me see. Next slide. So, sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying that the last 2 sentences I couldn't hear. There is sometimes a little bit poor voice. I don't know how you say that, but can you repeat the last 2 sentences from the previous slide, please?
Yeah, let me go back to that slide. So can you hear me now, Mira? Sorry. Is it better now?
Yes, I can hear you now better. Yes.
Okay, so the idea is, again, is this idea of monitoring risks and challenges. It's fundamental in terms of how you plan for the future and how different things can impact the destination, but you need to be monitoring and looking at and mitigating those risks and challenges. And I think I use the example of the pandemic as a good example of how frail the tourism supply chain is, and how we need to make those communities more resilient. And the way to do that is to monitor it, to understand it better, and to put in place measures that will help those communities become more resilient in the face of another disruptive event like climate change, or another pandemic, or another phase of the pandemic that we're experiencing now, which of course is affecting tourism globally. So I just wanted to make that connection between the need to monitor things and to revisit things and adapt things as things change, because sometimes they can change very quickly. So I think that in some ways it's, this for a lot of destinations, I don't need to tell you or those that are responsible for that it is complicated, and it perhaps may require a new way of working if you're not really looking at things in a larger context. But it also, and the first fundamental step to that, and this is what we're doing right now, is engaging stakeholders, getting the stakeholders together. And what we're doing now is more capacity building, but we also, you want to bring people together too for the planning and the strategic thinking that is needed to actually set a destination plan, or to set a management plan for a destination in terms of tourism management. So engaging with the stakeholders is that first fundamental step. But it's also this idea of a collective responsibility to change things. It's oftentimes, if you're not happy, for instance, with tourism at your destination, you want to change it, or if you want to perhaps highlight different aspects of a destination. This is often what people are trying to do right now is diversify the tourism offer, and I think this is something that's very important. And how you do that, and how you work with those different stakeholders that are going to help you do that is going to be very important. Because this idea of having this collective responsibility for changing things is at the heart of that idea of bringing people together, promoting that collective responsibility. As I mentioned before, each, from a hotel, a taxi driver, a concierge at a hotel, they're all part of that collective responsibility in terms of realizing that vision. And getting back to the first slide I said, is realizing that vision of what you want and what you want tourism at that destination to be. Then you put in place a strategy to achieve that vision, and then how you then implement that strategy is what we're talking about here. So it's engaging the stakeholders, it's promoting this collective responsibility, and then creating the effective governance and management models. This is something, again, that's fundamental to the long-term sustainability of a destination, to ensuring that the stakeholders are benefiting from tourism in that destination, is to have an effective governance. And this is something that you'll receive a questionnaire to sort of help us as the UNESCO experts to better understand what governance and what management models exist there. We often work very closely with destination management organizations. I heard that there's people on the call today that are dealing with that, so you know exactly what I'm talking about. But there may need to be other governance models or management models that don't exist that need to be creative. So this is something, again, that's very important and fundamental to how a destination is managed overall, and having those effective governance measures in place or structures in place is critical for that. So again, we can talk about the role of a destination management organization in this context, because traditionally a lot of DMOs, because the destination management organizations exist on different levels. You have a national tourism board for Finland that promotes Finland as a whole. Hopefully the National Tourism Board in their promotion talks about the Utsjoki region, talks about Lapland, encouraging people to go to and travel there. This is, again, if they aren't, there's a great opportunity then to do that. But there's also DMOs at a more local level, and the ones that are more responsible for the tourism in a much smaller context. And there's been a real shift, I think, in how DMOs are structured and what they're doing now. For a long time, and now they're shifting into the destination management realm. So management is becoming more important to fundamentally more important to the I think the overall structures and governance and management models that exist. So again, this is, I think going to be very critical, and we can talk more about that, about what exists in the region and whether or not that's adequate to do the service that we're talking about it doing. And then finally, it's a new way to develop those shared values and responsibilities. So I can't emphasize that enough, that this idea, you'll hear a lot about values, And that's because it should be at the core of any sort of cultural tourism that's developed, or if you're talking about a nature-based activity, or if the motivation to come to the region is primarily people wanting to be in nature, being with nature. In the rare case, you can't eat nature necessarily, so you have to, or the experiences you have may be associated with that nature. But oftentimes when you're talking about tourism in that sense, what you eat, what you experience is in another realm. It's not the trees or the bricks or the buildings, but it's everything else in that destination. Again, so this idea of how that's shared and how you present that is going to be fundamental to enhancing that visitor experience. Because in terms of tourism, that enriching and making that visitor experience better is the goal of any sort of proper tourism plan in that region. You want that visitor to come there to have a good experience, and again to have those communities where tourism occurs to benefit from that visit. I think so. That's what I think I'll stop there for this destination management presentation. I know I've given you a lot of information, so I'd like to maybe just, I know we structured the agenda previously that we would go right into the first one, but I think this may be a good opportunity just to ask the audience whether or not they have any questions, or maybe some sort of a dialogue that we can establish based on what I just told. So for instance, I mean, how are you going to define the destination? It's a fundamental question, and it's something that needs to happen at a very early stage. So is there any questions or comments on this?
Feel free to open your microphone and start the discussion if you have any comments or questions.
Doesn't look like.
Maybe we are happy, like people usually are. They're really satisfied.
That's great, and again, I know there's a lot of information, and but I mean, I would like to ask each and one of you, but I don't think there's time about what you think. What's the destination that you would consider in terms of tourism in Utsjoki? I think we may find that we'll get some different answers from the audience, but I don't think we have time for that. So I think the idea of destination management has really taken on, as I mentioned, a different feeling in a post-pandemic world with tourism. I think people are fundamentally rethinking a lot of things in terms of tourism. It would be interesting to better understand, and I think we'll get this in the in-person workshop, of the type of tourism that exists in the region, and more the seasonality of that tourism, because I think that from my understanding of the region, tourism is definitely seasonal. There's certain times of year when people come where people are wanting to go to Lapland to see reindeer. So you probably have more tourism in the wintertime perhaps than other destinations would, because in most destinations, in the winter there's not a lot of people traveling. But again, that's it. There's some very fundamental things that about the Utsjoki region that can attract different tourists at different times of the year. So really understanding that is going to be important. I think I see a question in the chat. Let me just see. Oh, it's Mira.
Yeah, I was just writing that if someone wants to write it down, and is too shy to open the microphone, so that was the point there.
Well, maybe if I can ask you, Mira, just because I know that you've been looking at tourism it from a different point of view in terms of understanding it, and just to say about a couple words about the important research that you're doing and how that then feeds into the tourism that gets developed, because I think we often have to rely on universities and things to provide that information, to provide that data and that research to then inform the tourism professionals that are responsible for creating destinations. If just maybe a couple words on that, because I think that too is very important, because again, for the longer term, it's going to be, if you can't manage something that you don't measure. I think that's the term. And so that measurement, that understanding is something that I know that as a researcher you do quite a bit.
Thank you, Peter. Because I've been working in this project so short time, I think Ella would be the best to reply for the tourism capacities in Utsjoki, and also our co-worker Monica. I think you are here, so Monica might be even more better to answer these research point of view in tourism. So trying to
no, that's good. I mean, yeah.
Away from me.
No, it was just more of a trying to better understand that. So yeah, Monica, please.
Or then Ella, if you want to start.
Or Ella,
Ella is in the same room with me.
Yeah.
So
well, I can say a few words from the strengths and the weaknesses in Utsjoki tourism, probably. So, well, the strength of Utsjoki is, of course, the beautiful Arctic nature and the silence, and many people go there to seek the silence and to relax and see the nature. And it's close to Norway, which is also close to the border, and of course the northern lights, and it's a great place to seek like relaxation and silence. And of course it has also strong Sàmi culture and a lot of opportunities. But of course, when it comes to the weaknesses in tourism, it's that Utsjoki is located very far away, so the distances are big. There's only one bus going per day, so it's the distance is one problem, and also the lack of services. There are not so many restaurants or hotels, and there could be more services also probably for the local people. But and the marketing is one problem, which has already mentioned before, that it needs to also be a little bit probably developed more. And what came into our discussions in our Utsjoki Living Lab workshops before is that sometimes the tourists need a little bit more information about how to behave in the nature, for example, that there can be these trashing problems, trespassing on local people's yards, and something which or like putting the rocks on top of each other, something like this, that the local people wish to have some guidelines for the tourists. And also when it comes to dressing during the winter time, for example, not everyone knows how to dress correctly in the minus 30 degrees. So there are also some security issues. And well, these are the things that came to my mind from the discussions with our Living Lab people.
No, I think that's very interesting in the sense that you've already highlighted, we'll do that kind of an exercise in when we meet face to face, this sort of strengths and weaknesses, because that's often a very good starting point in terms of saying, well, what how, because what I always like to say, it's how do I turn a weakness into a strength? How do I approach that problem? And I think that from what you've told me about, most people coming there are seeking that kind of a solace, kind of a peaceful experience in a destination. So that's really connecting to nature and perhaps to the local culture. It sounds like that's also something that people want to experience when they come there. The Northern Lights. The Northern Lights certainly are a time thing, so there you can't see. I mean, the Northern Lights are better at certain times of the year. So obviously, those that are going to be promoting the Northern Lights to come and see them, there's certain months of the year which are better. I think you also again indicated that there aren't enough services within the region or within the destination for tourists. I think, as I mentioned before, this idea of infrastructure and how do you convince people to open a business? Again, it's tourism is fundamentally, and it's like supply and demand on steroids in some ways. You have a lot of it is supply and demand. If you go to Utsjoki and there aren't enough restaurants, but there's a lot of more people that want to eat at a restaurant, you need to be able to capture that data and then use that data to say, okay, we need more restaurants, because what you don't want to do is open a tourism business or a restaurant thinking you're going to get tourists and you don't get them. So again, you really have to really look at the demand for that, because often demand sort of leads those things. But it sounds like fundamentally there's a need for more services. So how you do that again is going to be very important to building tourism in that destination. Because if what you don't want to have happen is for visitors to come to the destination and say there's not enough places to eat, or there's not, there's no services there, because that's going to prevent other people from going. Because again, if fundamentally in terms of tourism, we have what we call the visitor experience, or the visitor funnel, and how things are managed, and there's different phases of when somebody's coming into the destination. And the first part of that is the inspiration phase. And so I'm a potential visitor, and I've heard sort of about Utsjoki somehow, and it sounds kind of interesting. So I'm going to get as much information as I can about that online. This is how we're doing things nowadays. Or, you're going to do some research about it, or you may have seen an advertisement about it or something like that. So you want to get in, you want to inspire people to do that, to go there. And one way to do that is providing that information, and how you provide that information is again going to be critical. Because we oftentimes, the destinations that are, I went on TripAdvisor and I saw the top 10 destinations in Utsjoki. So it's already there, so those companies are already telling you, these are interesting places, these are things to see. There's Airbnb properties already there. So there's already some of that exists. So again, to doing that analysis and doing that fundamental data collection to determine, what services are needed. We do have, there are a couple of restaurants, we need more. I think one of the things that is a problem for tourism globally now is the tourism that existed in a lot of these destinations. Actually, they haven't had very many visitors. I don't know if that's the case of Utsjoki, and whether or not visitor numbers are down or have been down over the past 2 years. I'm assuming that there has been an impact. But what we've seen in the pandemic is that natural sites or experience in nature are what people have been doing. So actually, in a lot of destinations, numbers have gone up. In some of these protected areas, some of these natural sites that, where they've experienced an uptick in numbers, which is also causing some problems, because there's too many people coming to some of these sites, and that where previously they weren't doing that. So again, I think this idea of how we look at that and how we bring together those entrepreneurs, if you would, that would provide more services is going to be critical, and getting them around the table. And this is also obviously a good opportunity to involve young people in this idea and how they could, especially residents of that community. They are the best stewards of representing a local culture, and how and then how that local culture is reflected in the tourism services that are provided. So I think that sort of strikes me as something that an area that needs to more focus and more attention on that is probably needed as something going forward, because as I mentioned, you don't want to have out there in social media that there's not enough places to eat. That's not something good, or that the visitor experience isn't very good. But as I said, the beginning research that I've done is a lot of people do come because of the Northern Lights, for instance. That's a big draw. I mean, it's spectacular, it's amazing. And everybody, the reviews that I saw are people are saying that it's amazing. So it's a good place to go for that. So that, to me, that's a real strength, and you should build on that strength. You should develop that into something that could, sustain a different type of visitor, for instance. And again, that will probably come back to making sure that you have the services at that perfect area where they're going to be experiencing the Northern Lights.
I'm wondering.
So, any other reflections from anybody?
Exactly.
Please.
That was. I was also asking that if there is something what the participants would like to add.
If I may, Mira and Peter, I would invite participants to also just give their view about Utsjoki as a destination, considering that some of you are not from Utsjoki, and so basically you're domestic tourists, but still tourists. If eventually you go and visit Utsjoki, that maybe might be interesting to see. What you think of the destination from a, let's say, more objective perspective, and see if what you think is in line with the outcomes and the results of the Smart Culture Living Lab. And also why you go there. I mean, we've seen it's mostly nature-based tourism, which is of course now, even more and more the case during the COVID pandemic. But we also know from the results of the Living Lab, this first, let's say, bunch of work, that culture-based tourism is, let's say, something that might be further developed. And so maybe another question might be, do you think that it is worth developing cultural-based tourism in Utsjoki, or you think that you would anyway go to Utsjoki for nature-related reasons? So just some questions about, your perception of the destination we are talking about.
Well, I can comment on that a little bit. Like I said, I work for a company that's based in Utsjoki, but I'm not from Utsjoki. I'm actually from southern Finland. And I've also lived in the States for a while. And for me, the reason why I go to Utsjoki is definitely the nature, like you said. And it's also one of the last places with the huge wilderness areas anywhere in Europe, really. Having worked there for a while and done the marketing and stuff, it was actually kind of funny when you mentioned that like instances like Visit Finland should be doing destination management and marketing for us as well. But at least so far, we've kind of found that that's more of a threat for us, the way Finland is marketed, or how like Lapland is marketed. because Utsjoki area and that area is very different from, say, Rovaniemi area. And for us, Rovaniemi area comes off as sort of a Disney World of Lapland, if you will, where you can go to the Santa Claus land and have husky rides and do all that stuff, which is not really, that doesn't really tie into the Sami culture as far as what I've learned. And it's not something that we can offer, or we don't even want to offer, because we want to be, more based in nature and the wilderness areas that we have. So that's something that we struggle with, like having customers over, they also want to have the Santa, they also want to have the Huskies, and they also want to have all of this stuff that has been marketed to them by Visit Finland and sites like that. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of interesting point, that organizations like that are actually, in a way, the marketing that they're doing is sort of a threat for us, at least the way I see it. And what I've also found is that that area is so unique, and it's kind of sad to see it going the same way with the tourism and the stuff that it's offering than rest of Lapland. I would like to see it differentiate itself a lot more and find the true strengths and really be in the nature-based tourism, but also in the Sami culture and what's truly traditional for that culture, which is not, for example, husky rides and glass igloos and stuff like that. So I think there's a lot of opportunity, but it's, like you said, it's a very small place. It's a small population. There's not a lot of housing, for example, for just employees or people coming there to start businesses or anything like that. So, but yeah, that's some of my thoughts.
No, I think that's very interesting in the sense that but in that sense, it's that you've really illustrated the strength of the destination. It's not that other place where there's husky rides and glass igloos and you want to keep that. If that tourism already exists somewhere, fundamentally you absolutely don't want to have the same offering in Utsjoki. I mean, it makes no sense. You have a very unique situation there, and in my example of like a national tourism board sort of promoting the destination, if they're promoting it in the same way that they're promoting all of Lapland, then that's a disservice to the destination. That needs to fundamentally change. And again, you need to work with Visit Finland and say, we want something different. We don't want to be lumped. We already have that. You understand that. And obviously that, you have to go further afield to get to Utsjoki. So if I'm a visitor coming to Santa's workshop, it's before you get to Utsjoki, so there's also maybe an opportunity within that of those visitors going to see that, to wanting something else and wanting that more intimate experience with nature. And that's what you get for Utsjoki. You fundamentally absolutely don't want to be creating those same kinds of visitor experiences and attractions that are more on that mass tourism and that aren't necessarily reflective of the local culture. So it's fundamentally what you can do is sort of the local culture. Those people are the ones that need to be in the discussion on how tourism should develop in the region. And if everybody is agreeing with you, Jonah, about that, and I'm assuming, I'm sure they are, then you have your fundamental thing that makes you different and can attract a different kind of tourist. Where right now every destination is thinking about this. They're seeing it, they're looking and reflecting about the tourism they had before the pandemic. And now, what's going to come after, right? Once people start to travel again. And there's a lot of attention on quality versus quantity. The region probably can't, just from a services point of view, you can't handle, much higher numbers necessarily. But again, so understanding that and having that balance between the growth of tourism that potentially you would want to see in Utsjoki, balanced out with that very unique culture, the very unique experience that you have with nature. You don't want to ruin that. You don't want to change that, because then it just becomes a second-rate version of the stuff that's already established, because that kind of tourism isn't already established. And it sounds like you want to put those measures in place to prevent that from happening. You don't want to have that kind of tourism coming into Utsjoki, because it's very unique, and it doesn't sound like it would be supported by the local community.
Kirsi has a hand up. Please, Kirsi.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. And thank you, Jonna. You just brought up the topic that we've been trying to raise within the last 5 years, that we had the project in responsible Sami tourism at Sami Parliament in Finland. And as Lisa, who represents Visit Finland here, also knows, we've been trying to raise the issue of husky dogs, which we call borrowed traditions, as they are part of someone else's culture, which is marketed in Finland, as well as igloos, which is also part of someone else's culture. That it gives totally wrong picture and image of whole of Lapland. And it's one of the major things that the tourism industry says, that there's demand for it, and that's why they have to offer it. And by creating the demand, at the same time, there's this more demand. The whole of Lapland is kind of like, as Jonna said, sold as Disneyland, and that's one of the major issues also. And also the fact that Sami culture and Sami people have been misrepresented in tourism for decades. So it sounds extremely simple to say that you have to sell something else, but the tourism industry wants to sell something where there's demand for it, especially after the hard 2 years because of the pandemic. So it is extremely hard to sell those unique selling points when there's such a huge misrepresentation of the whole area, and especially of Sami culture. And in Sami Parliament, we've been trying to tackle that problem by creating visitor guidance, which will be published in a short while. Finally, it's going to include the visitor guidance and vocabulary for tourism in Sami homeland, which Utsjoki is one of the 3 municipalities, or 3.5, as there's Sodankylä and also Inari and Enontekiö, or northern part of Sodankylä, which is part of Sami homeland. And one of the misrepresentations is that the whole of Lapland is sold as the home of Sami people, which is not the truth. And it's not part of Sàmi. Rovaniemi has nothing to do with the Sami homeland, and still it's marketed as such. So what can we do when the massive amounts of marketing money against us, and we have just teeny tiny resources when we're trying to tell the story or the narrative that wants to be told by the Sami people, which is the correct story. And there's no way we can control it, as people keep on selling the false images. And we also, there's that what we call the cultural identity theft, when people pose as Sami even though they're not. So there's a lot of wrong stories and storytelling, and a lot of kind of like they make fun or insult the Sami people by telling those stories as Sami being part of the helpers of Santa Claus. That means the fairy tale creatures. There's a lot of examples, but I won't take more of your time. But thank you, Jonna, for raising up that question.
Anybody else? Well, just to comment on that, because it sounds again on the fundamental communication and marketing of the destination. Sounds like there's a lot to work with. To me, what you just described is something that it's not, I don't think it's necessarily insurmountable. And if I could call on the person from Visit Finland that's here, you know, what would it take for Visit Finland, for instance, to change, you know, to take a different approach to the marketing and communication surrounding Utsjoki? Because I think that you know, that could help, you know, because that what I was going to say in terms of how you overcome those challenges. You obviously need to you know, you need some good partners. For instance, you need, you know, those people that are marketing those destinations or selling those destinations or inspiring people to go to those destinations. I think is very critical, and how you use that media and how you use it is going to determine whether you're going to be successful or not. Because it sounds like from what I'm hearing is you don't want, you know, big numbers to be coming. You want a different type of tourism. You want this quality experience there, and it's a bit of a chicken and the egg in the sense that you want to create those services and those experiences that are in line with those local values and reflect those local values and aren't artificial or the Disneyland that already exists. Because it sounds like you have an opportunity to make some changes in that and put together a strategy that helps you do that. And from my experience and what we've done is working with a partner that can help that. This is, you know, to reach those audiences with a different kind of approach to you have to almost re-educate people about, hang on, you know, you think of Lapland, you know, it's this very commercialized situation that exists now. That's probably going to be very difficult to change for that area of where Santa's workshop is and all that other kind of tourism. The good news, it sounds like it doesn't yet exist in Utsjoki. They're not quite trying to duplicate that. Maybe I'm wrong, but there's an opportunity to really distinguish yourself. And again, it comes down to marketing communication. But Lisa, let me hear from you. It would be very interesting to hear from you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Peter, and thank you also, Kirsi, for bringing up this really important topic. Well, first of all, at Visit Finland, we do not market Sàmi with huskies or igloos. Actually, those unique selling points or those points of differentiations, how we different Lapland from other destinations. Neither igloos are there, nor are huskies. Reindeer, of course, is. And of course, we bring out some extraordinary accommodation that Destination Lapland has to offer. We also do make the difference between Sàmi and Lapland, because the Lapland is the geographical region of the northernmost Finland. But like Kirsi also mentioned, and also like how we have come to this is actually a big thanks to the collaboration with the stakeholders, Sàmi Parliament being one of the partners. But Kirsi also pointed at how we are actually like with a very small marketing budget, we are also against really big marketing budgets, because huskies and igloos are something that sell. So this is, for example, something that people, if you're doing some digital research, this is something what people are seeking when they're searching Finland or when they're searching, for example, winter destinations. So it's one of the most common keywords that people are using. They are searching for igloo accommodation or husky safaris. So this is something about its economic decision. I would imagine that a lot of companies have decided, for example, name their accommodation as igloo, Arctic igloos, for example, or husky safaris in Arctic igloo resort, and so on, because then they got a lot of search hits. This is what customers are asking for, and that's what they are offering it. And this is also what the tour operators, this is the image that they want to help, that they offer destinations with igloos and huskies. So it's a little bit like this supply demand question as well. And we do take the role of educating then our stakeholders, who are also those travel agencies and tour operators selling our destinations. But it's not so easy when customers are specifically asking for igloos, and then you have to start with educating that they are actually not igloos, and or if they want to visit an authentic igloo that cannot be found from Lapland. But I hope that this will a little bit bring the scope of the dilemma, what we are facing here, and also a little bit clarify that fact that we are actually not using neither huskies or igloos when we are talking about destination Sàmi. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I mean, I think you really highlighted the difficulty in all of this, because once a certain kind of tourism exists, it's hard to change that. And I won't underestimate the difficulty it takes. So oftentimes what you want to do is identify those tour operators, or those that are a different tour operator, that understand the values of the local culture, that understand the uniqueness of the place and the type of tourism that it seems like most of the local community wants. Because I think there are those kinds of businesses out there. And this is something else that we're seeing quite a bit of a shift, and I don't know how long it'll last, but we have a partnership with Expedia, where it's called we've launched what we call the UNESCO Sustainable Travel Pledge. And this is basically what we're trying to do with the hospitality sector, is really have them commit to more sustainable practices in their businesses. We started it in Thailand, and we were looking mostly at reducing single-use plastics in that tourism supply chain. But it has now gone global, and we're really looking at more how tourism supports, or how the partners of Expedia, the hospitality partners, contribute to community, well-being, and really focusing on the community. And it's been very interesting, and seeing the response that we have from those hotel companies, and wanting to make those kind of commitments, because they do understand that fundamentally they perhaps need to change, and certainly how they're operating in some of these communities. So it's been a real eye-opener in that sense, and on the demand on perhaps of the hospitality sector to become more sustainable. But really the research that they've done on consumers, consumers are now saying they're going to spend more money on something that's more sustainable or that's different. So I think there is an opportunity to identify those tour operators or those companies that are doing that. And I think one of the more famous one is Gap Adventures, for instance. They take people to, it's more kind of an adventure tourism kind of experience, but it's really community based. And so everybody that books through Gap Adventure expects what I would think that an experience in visiting Utsjoki is all about. So I think it's again, fundamentally identifying those partners that you can work with that will help you achieve what you want to achieve. We did another project that we had where on marketing communication. So I don't know if you've noticed, but I'm segueing into our next communication. We're talking about communication a lot, so we're kind of covering the next topic, because I see that we're running out of time. But I think that it's fundamentally we had we understood that there was this issue right there. We created what we call the World Heritage Journeys Project, and it was with National Geographic as a partner. And National Geographic was there was an alignment of values between UNESCO and National Geographic, wanting the same kind of thing in terms of tourism. And it was a marketing and promotion platform that we created. But what we really wanted to present is really deep content. So the tagline that we use is, we want you to travel differently and travel deeper. So and presenting that information to the visitor or potential visitor was what we were trying to do, to inspire them to have a different kind of experience, and to understand that that in these destinations, there's a local culture that is worth experiencing authentically in a way that's respectful to that community. And so I think there is certainly a tourism market for that. And it's how you reach those people. And again, it's going to be fundamentally working with the different partners to do that, the like-minded partners to do that. It's not any, I think, more complicated than that, in the sense of there's not a silver bullet out there, is what I'm trying to say, in terms of how you're going to solve that problem. Because you know, with Visit Finland, it sounds like that, you know, you are under pressure from market demands. You know, that's understandable. That's what it is. If you're seeing a demand for a certain type of tourism, there's going to be businesses that are going to fill that demand because they make money off that demand. That you don't, there's an opportunity perhaps to change things or to chart a different path, but it sounds like there's a very short window to do that, because it sounds like some of this, what I would say, it's not mass tourism in the sense, but it's a type of tourism. I think the good word is the Disneyfication of tourism. You don't want that to seep into the Utsjoki region, and I think everybody would probably agree with that. Even some of these tour operators, it's like because it's a unique experience. Is what you would be marketing and communicating for Utsjoki, which is very different than the experience that they're going to get doing a husky ride or staying in the igloo. And so how you present that information and how you communicate that information gets back to what we were talking about before, the different points to do that. Everybody kind of working together, but you really have to bring fundamentally people together to agree that this is what they want. And then you sort of map out, okay, well, how do we then achieve that? Because everything that exists right now, you're going to have to be working with, you're going to have to be working a bit uphill in that sense of changing people's minds about Lapland, because people think of Lapland and they do think of Santa Claus. But I think those discerning visitors, and again, if you can capture them and get them coming to that region and talking about that, because this is something else in terms of communication. I mentioned the tourism funnel, and so there's an opportunity to communicate when people are planning their trip, and there's the opportunity to communicate once you are traveling to your destination, and then obviously once you're in your destination. And I think this, from what I'm hearing from you, is that there's a need to educate the visitor about how to behave in that destination, how to be respectful of the local culture. Again, there's working with partners is how you're going to do that. So whatever website I'm on to get inspired, you want those messages to say, this is a unique place, it's a special place, you have to treat it specially. It's possible to do that. Again, it's fundamental, and it could then be that is how that destination is seen very differently from one very close by, but it's different. And I think again, you have to segment that market and target that market with those messages that would be positively received by those visitors that want that unique experience, that hate the Disneyfication of destinations, and fundamentally do not want to take a husky ride on a sled or sleep in an igloo, because they know that doesn't necessarily reflect the local culture. So again, this idea of how you choose your partners is going to be very important. And again, I think they do exist, but it's not easy, especially when you have very small marketing budgets. So again, looking at the different, there's transportation companies, there's others that can help you with this type of thing. One of the World Heritage sites that was experiencing bad visitor behavior, there's a couple, and I'll just give you some examples about how they've overcome the situation of when people come to a destination, they perhaps aren't behaving properly. They because they perhaps don't understand the local values, or that they it's a fundamental mismatch, and it's not necessarily that they're not behaving properly. It's oftentimes because they don't know, they don't have the information. So for instance, in Angkor Wat, which is a big, massive World Heritage Site, very popular with certain tourism source markets. They had huge Chinese visitors coming into those sites in Southeast Asia. And there was problems. There was problems with people not respecting the site. There was problems with, people taking chips of Angkor Wat, or climbing on the monuments. And so it got to the point where they fundamentally needed to do something very quick. It got to a point where they didn't have the staff to monitor it, and it was a problem. So they worked with all the tour operators. They brought all of them together, the businesses, and on an education campaign. So they have they created some communication material that they were giving to the visitors. In the hotel, you got a leaflet saying the kind of the do's and don'ts of when you're visiting. Please realize that this is a spiritual place. It's not just some Disneyland thing that has been put there for you to take a photo of and get your selfie and then leave. The selfie tourism, it's a problem. It's attractive to a lot of visitors, and this is again sort of pre-pandemic, where travel was cheap. There was a lot of people coming, and the motivation was kind of to take that selfie, to take a picture with a reindeer, or take a picture of yourself in an ice igloo, and then you post it on Instagram. So again, that's not the tourists we want for the region, it sounds like. So I think that maybe we can dig a little deeper into this in the next workshop, is to try to identify, well, how do what's the strategy to help us achieve what we want to achieve? Who are our partners that we've identified that could help us achieve what we want to achieve? And then how do we then communicate those messages? Because what happened in Angkor Wat, it was very effective. You give people information, the number of incidents of people behaving badly has dropped considerably. On another extreme in Europe is, with pre-pandemic, a lot of World Heritage cities were experiencing huge numbers of visitors. And I promised Costanza and Matteo I won't use Venice this time. I'm going to use Amsterdam, which is another poster child of what UNESCO would want to see in terms of tourism in Amsterdam. And the World Heritage Site of Amsterdam, people don't even realize why Amsterdam's a World Heritage Site. It's a pretty city, it's a historic city, but there are fundamental criteria and reasons why a World Heritage or a site is inscribed on the World Heritage List. And within those reasons are rich storytelling opportunities. There's because it may not be obvious why a site is a World Heritage Site. What is that outstanding universal value? And communicating that is fundamental to people understanding why they're in that site. And it does sort of tie into that respect that they should have in terms of they're in somebody else's living room, if you would, in terms of Amsterdam. But the destination sort of evolved into a fun party town. People go to Amsterdam, they have the cafes with marijuana, they have the red light district. Then all of a sudden Amsterdam is being marketed as a destination to party and have fun. Well, that's terrible for the residents, because drunk people, partying people, they behave badly and they don't treat people well and they don't respect the community. So Amsterdam has been putting in place a lot of measures to counter that, to fining people for bad behavior, fining people for public urination. Again, these terrible things that kind of evolved in this destination because it turned into something that it wasn't intended in the beginning. And so the mayor of Amsterdam wants to turn that around and of putting in policies in place to do that. So there is ultimately, we talk a lot about communication and marketing, but there perhaps may be some policy types of things that could help as well, at the regional level and to buffer against that and to put something in place where you can always come back to that policy, because you often get pushback from some businesses. And I think this is important to emphasize with tourism in the region, and certainly the the tourism that exists close to the region, which is more of the mass Disneyland type of tourism, is once that is in place and well established, it's almost impossible to change. That's been my experience. I think that's fundamentally a very difficult long-term process to change that in people's minds, and once it's well established in a destination. So it is a bit of an uphill battle. Not to say it can't happen, but I don't think fundamentally that's what we're doing in Utsjoki. It doesn't exist in Utsjoki. We want to, I think there's a real opportunity to do things differently. And it sounds like there aren't a lot of entrenched interest already to go that other route of more Disneyland tourism rather than more authentic tourism, because there is absolutely a market for that. You just have to reach it. You have to understand it, know where they're coming from, and then work with those partners to reach it.
Thank you, Peter. I'm taking a look at the time, and we have still a few, let's say 3 minutes left. And for your information, that I have also now sent the survey for the participants. So if you want to say anything about the survey, please, I think now it's the best moment.
Okay, great. Yeah, so the survey, we thought that it would be a good idea to get more information that can inform our next face-to-face workshop. So we could, so it's, I mean, for me, it's, I'm, you know, through this, I'm better understanding the situation there. But if we can get that information from, and I think it's important to get it from different people's points of view, because you're going to get different answers. You'll see in the survey that we're asking you for what you think are the attractions, how would you market the destination, and then just some more fundamental information about who's responsible for what. So you'll see from the survey that we're really trying to gather this information to, again, to make sure that our next meeting is more strategic, and then obviously in line with what you're already doing in the Living Lab, because this is just a part of it, and I understand that, but it's a fundamental part of it. So I think in terms of that survey, I know it's hard sometimes, everybody's very busy, but if you could take a few minutes to answer that and send it back to us, that would be much appreciated.
Yeah, basically you can send the survey back to me, and tomorrow I will send you it again, and also you can get my email from that, or the guidance how to go further with the survey. So we are very happy to receive your replies. So it's
and also, if I may, Mira, I would invite, of course, all of you to share this survey, because even if I mean, your networks won't really participate in the next workshop, of course, we hope so. So please share the invitation for the workshop on the 12th with your networks, with colleagues, with anyone you think might be interested and might bring an added value, and also be, let's say, be interested in the discussion and in the exercises. It will be a bit more practical, the workshop on the 12th. But beyond the invitation, we would invite you to share also the survey, because anyway, even if the respondents are not present at the next workshop, anyway, we will gather a broader perspective on the destination, on its problems, on its priorities, on its issues. To me, and I think this is shared by Peter, Mira, Ella, I think today's discussion was very interesting in terms of conflicting narratives, because talking about marketing a destination is, of course, fundamental. It's very, very important. It's interlinked with